Younger generations are worried, are we ever even going to be able to own a home? What kind of advice can you offer?
Well, the beautiful thing about real estate, and one of the great and rare qualities, is that every property is unique. And our advice always to young people, if they want to buy a house, is never be out of the market. You never know if the house you've always wanted will come on the market. And I can tell you, if you don't stay in the market, you'll kick yourself.
Unlocking Saratoga's real estate secrets. Welcome to Selling Saratoga, a podcast about the real Saratoga real estate scene in one of the Northeast's hottest and fastest growing markets. Our listeners are going to gain expert insight on the best ways to make decisions about home improvement, investment, design, buying, selling, and everything in between.
I'm Helen Mastrion.
And I'm Noelle McLaren. Together, Helen and I have the keys to your future in Saratoga real estate.
Hello. I'm Helen Mastrion, Associate Broker at Hunt Real Estate in Saratoga Springs. I'm excited today because we have a legacy real estate titan. His name is Peter Hunt. He is the Chairman and CEO of Hunt Real Estate. In this episode, we talk about how Hunt built their business over the last 113 years. We talk about what the Great Depression did for real estate. And if you're young and looking at some point to buy your own home, Peter shares some secrets to success. Thank you so much for listening.
Welcome, everybody. We are now here for our next episode of Selling Saratoga, and we are joined today by Peter Hunt. He is the guy at Hunt. Welcome.
Well,
it's so good to have you here.
Thank you, Noelle. Pleasure to be here.
So after all of this time, explain how many offices of Hunt offices there are in the Capital District region and how many agents are represented there, and then in the big picture of things, Buffalo, Syracuse, Massachusetts, how many? We like numbers.
Start with the big picture. We have 58 offices total, spanning from the western suburbs of Boston to Buffalo and then leapfrogging to Arizona. Right. Don't ask me why, but we do. So long story short, we have around 150 people in this region right here, and we've got offices in Glens Falls and Bolton Landing, here in Saratoga, Slingerlands, Greenbush, so it's 6 or 7, I'm not sure exactly right now, but inside those offices, we also run other parts of our company as well. The mortgage company licenses each of our branches. So in New York State, a mortgage bank has to have a physical location in order to do business, and so we use our real estate offices as physical locations for our mortgage company as well. We're also in the title business and the insurance business. We have about a total of 300 and some odd back office employees in all the businesses. My grandfather started a business in 1911, the ripe old age of 20. And so it was an interesting time back then because he did not go to college. I asked him one time when I was in college myself, I said, where'd you go to school, Gramps? And he goes, Slippery Rock.
Oh, my God.
There is a Slippery Rock college, but he didn't go there. He was just kidding me.
Did you believe him?
I didn't know what to believe at that point in time. But my father later told me that he started in the business actually by accident. He owned 5 movie theaters that were not talkies. They were silent movies.
Wow.
There's a piano player and stuff. And what happened was he and his brother thought it would be a great idea if they controlled the distribution of the films as opposed to the films themselves. And so they wound up selling the movie theaters because they went broke in the distribution business.
Wow.
And so in the process of selling those 5 buildings, he acquired other businesses. And he became, first of all, the Hunt Business Agency. And in so doing, he would acquire real estate and businesses. He owned a potato chip factory at one time. He owned a company called Delvin Industries, which became American Precision Industries.
Just a businessman.
He was just I would never say seat of the pants. My grandfather wasn't like that. He was very kind of disciplined, but at the same time, he could isolate an opportunity and pursue it. And eventually, it became a real estate company.
Are any of the buildings of the theaters still around? Were they all in Buffalo?
They were actually in the southern tier in Cattaraugus County and north up towards the beginning of Erie County. But it was he grew up and my grandmother grew up and my great-grandparents grew up in the town called Delavan. But Saratoga is an interesting place from my family perspective. My mother went to Skidmore.
Yes.
Oh, so there are local ties.
Yes.
I've been here many times. My daughters rode, and so we were always in competition down the road here. And I coached hockey, and we were always playing hockey here at least once a year in a tournament down the road as well. So
Saratoga is a special place.
Very special place. I love it here.
And I know that, explain who Myron Hunt is, who built the Borders building. A.K.A. the Finger Paint Building.
Yes,
A.K.A. the Prime Corporation Building now.
Well, my Uncle Myron and my father and my grandfather were all partners years ago. My uncle split off somewhere in around the early 60s to start a development company. And he built the Clifton Country Mall, among other things, and he also built the Borders across the street. And when Borders went out of business, I quickly called him and said, Uncle Mike, can I buy that place from you?
Oh, wow.
My cousin said, no, we're not selling it. We're trying to figure out what to do with it. And it's become a bunch of other things, as you know.
Right.
Did you see it as you drove into town, how they're deconstructing it?
No, I didn't
brick
see that.
by
You've got to
brick.
check it out. This is what it looks like right now.
Yeah, look.
You can
They're
see- it's a see-through.
literally, they're raising it by 2 stories, 45,000 square feet from 25,000, and it's
Wow.
Balzer and Tuck Architect. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, they're
I wish
expanding
It's
up.
kind of sad.
I wish I'd bought it.
Me too. We could add our offices over
I know.
there.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Oh, what a missed
That's what I was
opportunity.
thinking. One more thing about this area. My grandmother, I was close with my grandparents, and my great-grandfather was a New York State legislator for 2 non-consecutive terms at the beginning of the last century. And he was a real Renaissance man. He was, first of all, a school teacher. Then he went back and got his degree in medicine. And then he decided to run for politics. He ran against another of my great-grandfathers way back when.
Oh, no.
And he won, and then he lost, and he won again. But the fact of the matter is, I asked my grandmother, what was the happiest time? Where did you like living best of all? And she said, Albany, New York. Fast forward a couple generations, my daughter is a fellow at the Rockefeller School for Public Policy. And where'd she live? Right in that same square.
Oh, that's so special.
That's so
So we have
cool.
great connection to this community. It's a wonderful
Very
community.
nice.
So commercial real estate was the bedrock way back when, because my grandfather was basically exchanging real estate and businesses together. Later on, my father really kicked off the residential business. But my grandfather, during the Depression, became very much involved in residential because, and I asked him, I was asked in 5th grade, talk to your parents and grandparents about what it was like during the Depression. Went home and asked my mother what it was like during the Depression. She said, well, it was terrible. My grandfather was a Cornell-educated engineer, went to work for the Pierce Arrow Company in Buffalo, which was the Rolls-Royce company of the United States. And they went out of business during the Depression. All of a sudden, there literally were 2 Pierce Arrows in our driveway, my grandparents' driveway. Well, all of a sudden, there were none. And my grandfather was out of work. He wound up getting a job with Harrison Radiator, which is part of General Motors now. I asked my mother what it was like, and she said people would knock on the door, and all of a sudden, there'd be somebody at our dinner table. And they'd be looking for a meal, and all that, and they'd leave. And everyone was very nice, but it was a terrible time. My father came home, and I said, Dad, what was it like during the Depression? He didn't know about my conversation with my mother. And he said, as far as I know, there was no Depression. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, your grandfather was in real estate. And I said, what does that mean? He said, talk to your grandfather. So we always had pancakes on Sunday after church at my grandparents' house. So I asked my grandfather, Gramps, what was it like during the Depression? He said, well, it was tough. I said, how did you do business? And he said, well, I'd get in my car, drive to my office. I'd start to plan a trip to each of the banks. And I'd go to the banks and ask them for a list of their foreclosures. And I'd go back to my office and I'd call anybody I knew who had any money at all. In the process, he was buying and selling houses for himself. They owned a home in Buffalo, on one of the great streets in Buffalo. They had a ballroom on the 3rd floor, for example.
Wow.
They didn't move a lot, but my grandfather bought several houses, all foreclosures. Wound up in a great house in a place called Deerhurst Park, and then moved to another house in Snyder. But I remember going to look at their last house. My father said to me, do you want to go look at a house with your grandfather? I said, sure. Electricity was off. It was summertime. We walked in this house. We walked in the back door, walked up the steps, and my grandfather turned to my father. He said, write it up, Duke, and turned around and left.
Wow.
That was a nickname for my father. That house was pictured in House Beautiful magazine, for example. It was the coolest little house I ever saw in my life. And now it's owned by one of my friends from high school.
So if you were growing up as a Hunt sibling or son or daughter, what if you didn't want to go into real estate?
Well, the interesting thing was my father never said, hey, you got to get your license, you got to do this.
Right.
He didn't bug me about it at all. As a matter of fact, I was pretty sure I didn't know what my father did.
Wow.
He just worked hard. That was it.
Honestly, I didn't know what he did. He never said, well, gee, we sold 12 houses today. And that was never the case.
That's not what I talk about at my dinner table.
Well, and I did the same thing with my kids. My kids would ask me sometimes, what was it like, what do you do? And I said, well, you see our signs, that's what we do. Yeah. So,
Well, isn't that's like a sure way to deter somebody from doing something, right? Is to kind of shove it down their throat, right? So
exactly right.
When I first started, I was with another brokerage, a smaller brokerage, where I cut my teeth for the first 5 years, and I have fond memories for the most part, except for the exit. And then when I came to Hunt because of an unbelievable broker named Mary Payton, this is my 4th year. What is it about? I know what it's about, but I want to hear it from you. What is it about the Hunt special sauce that just makes us so successful?
Well, I don't know if I can put that in a few words, but if I were to put it in 4 words, it would be always there for you, which is the vision of this company. We are an integrated real estate and homeownership services organization, which we have no competitors in that field across upstate New York, in that we are brokerage, we are mortgage banking, title insurance, property and casualty insurance, commercial brokerage, and commercial property management.
So like start to finish, there with you the whole way.
Our objective is, as the vision says, always there for you. We want all of our sales professionals to be able to guide their customers all the way through the transaction without having to leapfrog out and put the deal in the hands of somebody that we may know or may not know.
Right.
And then we're just waiting for somebody else to do something. Inside our organization, we can track everything. If somebody has a problem with a deal inside our company and they happen to call me, I can find out what's going on. If one of our sales professionals or the buyer's agent uses another bank, we don't know what's going to happen. But we do know one thing, that most lenders are pretty good at maintaining the records of their customers. In many cases, better than our own sales professionals. And we know if that deal goes outside of our organization, we lose control. I want our sales professionals to have control. So if you want to talk about secret sauce, if that customer stays within our organization, we know where they are, we know what they're doing, and we're hopefully going to be the first to know when they want to make their next move. And in the process, for example, we can contact them when it's the right time to refinance. Right now, the Federal Reserve has reduced their prime rate by 0.5 point, which is a huge reduction. In the scheme of things, it's 10% of the total, which is huge, and they anticipate maybe another 75 basis points before the end of the year. In that environment, we want to make sure that our people are well aware. And how that trickles down into the mortgage business, we want our people to know that too. The only way we can do that is by being in those businesses and having our pulse on it every day. And I don't know if that's secret sauce or not, Helen, but from my perspective, I want our people to be successful. I want them to grow profitably, and I want them to deliver a superior experience, which you can only do through an integrated process.
The corporate structure of your family and everything that you've put in place, our marketing department, our IT, the corporate people of 350 employees, is so refreshing. Agents need leadership. We're out there selling, we're doing our thing every day, but we need to have somebody who's finding the best programs to use, who's finding the best incentives, who's finding the best things for our clients to make us the best professionals. And I'm impressed almost every day.
Oh,
thank you.
Anyway.
Well, it's my pleasure.
No crying.
That
Okay.
was very touching. You've seen a lot of ups and downs in this industry, and I'm not just talking about you, your whole family. I mean, you're talking about Great Depression, you're talking about a long history in real estate. So when you hear about times like these right now, where younger generations are worried, are we ever even going to be able to own a home? What do you have to say to those people? What kind of advice can you offer?
Well, the beautiful thing about real estate, and one of the great and rare qualities, is that every property is unique. And our advice always to young people, if they want to buy a house, is never be out of the market. Because you never know what's going to happen with interest rates. You never know if the house you've always wanted will come on the market. And you want to make sure that if it does, the professional, and I'm not talking about an agent. Everybody's an agent. I'm talking about a sales professional. Somebody really knows what they're doing. Helen's one of those people. You want to make sure that that person's always got their finger on the pulse and can make you aware of everything that's available. Every change in the market, every change in availability, so that if that one house comes up, and I can tell you, if you don't stay in the market, you'll kick yourself.
So it's important to always have your finger on the pulse of the real estate business if you want to stay active and get what you want to do. And if you're struggling to find a home, and if you're concerned, will I ever be able to own a home? So what exactly does that look like? Or what does that mean to a buyer, to someone like me, to a consumer?
There's two issues: availability and affordability. And those things are always changing. Availability in our market, it's not like I can go out and manufacture a house on Locust Street and just duplicate that thing.
Right.
There's only one. And so that home's availability is the number one thing that our sales professionals must keep our customers aware of. Secondly is affordability. We know, hopefully in that initial meeting, we'll be able to determine what that person can afford and how they can go about purchasing at home. There's hundreds of mortgage products, and we want to make sure we can find the one that's appropriate for that particular customer. Those things are always moving, and that's the issue. You always stay in the market. You have a professional guiding those two things principally, then you'll be able to buy.
I have clients who will say, I'm going to wait until the interest rates come down, or I'm going to wait until they think the market's better. Or regardless of how the market is, they're at home, they're looking on Realtor.com or Zillow or whatever they're looking at. But if you work with an agent, even though you might not be ready to go tomorrow or the next month or 6 months, if you keep in touch with somebody and they know what you're looking for and they know who you are, it's a relationship. It will help you in the long run, no doubt.
Who has time to sit there and look through all the inventory when you can have a professional do that for you and then say, hey, I know your price range, I know what you're looking for, and look at these things that just came on.
Real estate is a sport. At least in Saratoga, I think it is everywhere. People hobby at night. They're scrolling through the houses where they want to live.
I'm
whether
that
they're
person.
buying or not, right? You're a real estate junkie.
Right.
Whether they're buying or not. So if you make a relationship with somebody and they know what you're looking for, it might not be until you're ready to downsize but you have somebody who will hold your hand through the process or just share information with you. Wherever I go, people say, so how's the market? And I'll tell them one story about one transaction, and it's unbelievable because not everybody hears about all the stuff behind the scenes, which is why we're here.
Right.
But I just had a woman who became a friend of mine. She's on her 13th transaction that she tried to buy a house in Saratoga Springs and has run into losing 13 multiple offer situations, which is incredible, right? Over asking, threshold of the inspections raised. She did just get a mortgage pre-qual that was higher, so she could go a little bit higher. But we talk every day, whether it's a text or an email. We keep in touch because the minute something comes on, we're there.
Peter, I got to ask you, how does real estate in Saratoga compare to real estate in other areas in New York? Or outside of New York? I mean, what's so special or hot about this market? What makes it great or not great? Whatever you think.
There are 4 or 5 markets in upstate that I would describe as national or perhaps international markets. Lake Placid, Saratoga Springs, Canandaigua maybe, Skaneateles, Ithaca, Ellicottville. But these are very, very limited in terms of the opportunities. For example, availability in these marketplaces is always tight. They become a national marketplace because of their attractiveness that goes well beyond vicinity. Most people in their real estate experience stay within a relatively small radius geographically. Those markets attract people from everywhere. And when you walk around the streets of Saratoga, you're going to hear various languages. The other thing about Saratoga that makes it particularly attractive is you have a high-quality higher education here, which is extremely attractive to a lot of people. Another thing about Saratoga that makes it extremely attractive is the artistic culture that exists here, which is creative class is alive and thriving in this community. And if you look at the communities that are growing around the country, there's a couple characteristics that make them extremely viable. One is walkability. And Saratoga has an incredibly powerful central business district, if you want to call it that. The creative culture creates a social networking that doesn't exist in places without that. Having an institution like Skidmore here just breeds more of that. My mother studied nursing, of all things, but she was also an art student. This is the kind of community that draws a kind of an eclectic collection of people from all over because, not to mention the track, you've got something here that's absolutely unique. And with that, the culture that surrounds horse racing, which is a very affluent culture. Affluence attracts more affluence.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not just Saratoga Springs. We've been talking about doing more episodes about how it's grown so much that now it's the Wiltons, it's the Greenfields,
Ballston
it's
Spa. Milton.
Ballston Spa. I've heard even South Glens Falls. We're just creeping out and out and out. It's an epicenter for sure.
It's the walkability. It's the neighborhood. It's Main Street, Broadway. It's you can't find that in very few places. Simple as that.
Yeah.
So in recent months, including August 17th, there were changes that were brought down to the real estate industry from the Department of Justice regarding the relationship between a buyer and the buyer's agent. In a nutshell, or what it means directly to buyers, is that before an agent can show a property that's listed on the MLS, there has to be a written agreement between that buyer and his or her sales professional, aka agent, that says if the seller is not offering compensation, then the buyer is responsible for that compensation. So that's a new twist on how real estate has been done traditionally. Because even though it's been very negotiable on both sides, traditionally the seller is the one who pays the buyer's agent and the listing agent. How has it been going in the industry since these nice changes came about?
Don't take this the wrong way. It's in my mind, it's a nothing burger. I did an interview with the staff head of the association in Buffalo, Niagara, and I asked him, okay, who's advantaged by all this and who's disadvantaged? There was a pause, and he said, well, I can't think of anyone that's advantaged, but I can think a lot of people that are disadvantaged, principally first-time home buyers. Most of our first-time home buyers they're up to their limit in terms of the amount of cash they have available and the amount they can afford per month. So now a sales professional puts a piece of paper in front of them and said, if you want to look at houses, and it's not just me, anybody you look with, you have to agree to pay them if the seller, through their listing broker, doesn't offer me compensation. Well, wait a minute here. I don't have the extra money. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
So in that case, Helen will not be able to show that person a house where she sees specifically that there's no compensation flowing through the listing broker, and that's how it flows. It's not directly to the buyer agent. It flows through the listing broker to the buyer agent. It's really not the seller that makes that decision historically. It's the listing broker. Right. And that's why MLSs were created. So a listing broker could offer compensation to everybody else in the marketplace so that that listing broker could assure the seller that they were getting the most important thing in the transaction, which is called market value. If you look at the market value of anything, it's determined by the extent to which that product or service is offered to every available buyer, because that's the only way that you're going to know that you're getting the real value for that property. Being off market means that you are out of the market effectively to get market value for that home. Helen goes in to see a seller. Her obligation is to expose that property to every available buyer. Now a portion of the buyer, we don't know how big a portion that is, are going to be cut out of that.
So just as an example, if you're a first-time home buyer or a buyer even moving up, you need your closing costs, you need your mortgage money, you need your attorney's fees, all of this stuff. Now you might be faced with paying your agent, and that might blow you out of the water for a certain house.
Oh, especially when costs are as high as they are right now,
right,
as it is. Peter, you've been doing this a long time. I keep saying that. I mean, if you were the mastermind who got to create a solution to this giant problem,
oh boy,
what would you do?
The solution's already been created. It was created in the 1950s, and that is called the MLS. That's an open, transparent forum for brokers to communicate how they're being paid and what offer they're making to everybody else in the marketplace. The DOJ has always had this in their sights because they think it's price fixing. They think that there's a general price, that general way financially that brokers cooperate, so wink and a nod, oh, I'll do this for you if you do it for me, which is nonsense.
Absolutely.
Not
true.
Commissions have always been negotiable. People ask me, what's my commission? Well, that depends is the answer. It depends on a lot of things. But the fact of the matter is, as an organization, we have to set guidelines for Helen. We say, this is, in Saratoga Springs, this is what we think the market will bear in terms of our services. This is what we think are the competitive advantages we were talking about earlier that make it possible for you to perhaps charge more, and we think you're worth it. I've had discussions with some of our top people that were discounting their own services forever. I showed our two top people, for example, years ago in Buffalo, Niagara. Great competitors, great friends, but great competitors. And one of them said to me, I finally beat her this year. And I said, well, do you know she made more money than you? And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, she's not bashful about charging what she's worth. Look, I understand. I said, I understand. You want to get out of there, get the contract signed, go home, and got on the next deal. But you should be charging more. If you walked into a law firm today and you said, I've got a problem, I've got a parking ticket. There's an associate, he'll take care of it for you. Or she'll take care of it. Next day, you're indicted. You're going to walk in and say, oh, I don't care what it costs.
Yeah.
Get me the best guy you've got in the firm.
Yeah.
Get me off this thing. We have to look at selling a house as like that indictment. It's a serious challenge, a serious problem. Now, here's what happened. It looked real easy during the pandemic. There were 6.12 million single-family condominiums co-ops sold in that year in this country. 2023, 4.03. That's when all these lawsuits started years ago, by the way. The DOJ is yet to really act. They're sitting in the background right now watching how this whole thing evolves. They think we're a big cartel. That's utter nonsense. They don't realize how competitive this world is that we live in. Every deal Helen doesn't get, there's 10 people waiting in line to get that deal. Any deal. Do you think that's not going to affect the price of our services? So Helen has to walk in and say, look, there's 9 other people behind me here, but my services are more valuable for these reasons. And I'm going to suggest that you make an offer to cooperating brokers because that's the way we're going to get the most money for your house.
To the real estate agents, including your own, that say, how do I navigate these changes? What do you say to them? What advice are you giving?
First
Education.
of all, we have to educate them, as Helen says. We also have to provide the right forms. We have to provide the verbiage. We have to say, kind of reflex selling. If they say this is what we suggest you say. So that it doesn't, you don't get the deer in the headlights.
Right.
Oh, I've never heard that before. It's like choreography. There's only so many ways to do the foxtrot, okay? And when we go into it, we go into a seller situation, there's only so many objections you're going to hear. When I was studying sales to begin our training program, listening to somebody, and they said, there's only 2 objections in real estate. One is price, and the other is commission. Everything else falls into one of those 2 categories, no matter what it is. You have to be able to be nimble enough to see which bucket it goes in and then respond accordingly. If something falls outside of that, they're probably in the percentage of the population that's either criminal or insane.
Time now for our real estate horror story with Peter Hunt.
A popular thing in our industry at that time was floor time. You know, you sat in the office, and if somebody walked in or called in, they were your prospect. So I'm sitting there floor time, I'm 22 years old, and in comes a lady, and she says, I said, may I help you? She says, yes. So she sits down, she starts describing her house, and it's right near our office, and it's a good location. And I said, well, tell me more. Why are you selling the house? And she starts talking about the people. What people? Honestly, I'd never encountered anything like this, so I'm dumbfounded. She says, well, the people, you know, they're watching, and they're, this was Looney Tunes. So she said, would you come over to my house? I said, I think so.
You said yes?
I said yes.
I'd be like, I'll send my people. I'll send my people to meet your people.
Maybe I even asked her. But anyway, I'm in her living room. The drapes are drawn. It's about 80 degrees outside. It's warmer than that inside. Oh, God. And she's bundled up, and I'm sweating. Finally, I had the presence of mind of saying, do you have an attorney? And she said, yes, I do. Would you mind giving me his or her name and phone number? She's got it for me. And so I called this guy, and I said, I was over to see your client, and I was just wondering, is she okay? I mean, he said, have you ever heard of a frontal lobotomy?
No way.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
So I said, yes, I have.
Oh.
I did study that.
Wait, what year was this?
This was way back when, the 70s. So
were they doing that back then?
They were doing it for a long time.
Wow.
That was the way to do things at that point in time. They've since gotten better.
Was
at
this
it.
in Buffalo?
This is in suburban Buffalo.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
But anyways, I felt badly for this lady, and
Yeah.
so, but he advised me to wait and just see how things evolve, because it was not a good situation. And that goes to the point about there are people that fall outside in terms of their behavior and otherwise, that fall outside of the choreography of our business. And if it happens that way, you've got to walk away.
In this really challenging time for agents, what's a piece of advice you would give to not only people who are starting in the biz, this is a very tough time to join real estate, but also to us veterans? Got any pearls of wisdom?
I would give you advice that I was given when I thought I'd leave the business and go back to school years ago. Our job really right now depends more and more than ever before, perhaps, on expertise. So my advice would be advice I was going to learn as much as you can learn about this business from every side, every angle, know as much as you possibly can, know what every factor is going on, what's going on around us, what could influence everything about our business. We've got to know. My job is to make sure that you know what things to look for. I can't advise you every minute on those things, but if you know what to look for, you're going to know how to advise your clients. Direction of interest rates,
Right.
huge thing. Affordability, availability. What would make inventories grow suddenly? We've got to be able to answer that.
Right, absolutely.
So that's one thing. Know as much as you can. And secondly, outwork the competition. Right now, our industry got real lazy during the good years.
It was easy.
Real lazy. You listed a house, 2 days later you had 10 offers, and you put them in a grid and say, well, seller, I think you should take that one. That's not really hard work. That's not salesmanship. As far as hard work, study sales. There's a dance that we go through in sales, and sales of everything. And if we know how to navigate that process, we will be better than the competition. We have an industry of order takers right now, Helen, and the ones you see it, right?
I do.
And
I do.
and those people are they're gonna be walking into Mary's office and saying, "Give me some leads, please, because it's unfair. Helen's got all the leads." Well, Helen's working her tail off. That's why she gets the leads. Hard work, sales skills, knowledge.
Going on a
Wow.
podcast about real estate also, I would say, really helps your cause.
Tell us about your podcast.
Peter is a pro. He has his own podcast. How long have you been doing yours?
Well, it started as a radio show
Okay.
more than 30 years ago. And I got a call from a radio station, would I do a 15-minute radio show would I commit to 6 weeks? So what I did, what Helen did, I said, well, I don't know what to say after 3 minutes, so I'm going to invite a guest in.
Oh, you hired someone with a big mouth. Okay,
So
good.
I brought someone. Well, I kept bringing people in, and so all of a sudden they said, would you do an hour?
Oh, wow.
And I said, I was scared to death. So I've been doing an hour ever since. And so it's every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock on 9:30 a.m., 98.5 FM HD3. It's also on the Odyssey app. Get it anytime. And every one of our shows is on our blog at huntrealestate.com. 3 months ago or so, I said, people don't want to listen to a whole hour. What would they like to listen to? So we did some research, and we can get their attention for 6 or 8 minutes, something like that, before we lose them.
Oh, yeah, we have short attention spans, us millennials.
Yes, absolutely. Well, us old people do too. So it gets shorter and shorter. So what we decided to do was create a podcast, and I named it a course I taught in adult education way back when called Realizing Real Estate. And so that gives me license to talk about just about anything. So I've interviewed a couple of our congressmen. I've interviewed politicians and builders and developers. Our mission is to help people protect and enhance their investment in real estate.
Yeah.
And that gives me license to talk about just about anything.
Right.
Because everything affects that.
Everything.
Well, and it sounds like you can talk about any of those subjects. I mean, your history and wealth of knowledge is amazing.
I love hearing him talk about anything from his history with the movie theaters to, just his advice.
Right.
I'm going to listen. I'm going to tune in. It's awesome.
Cool.
Well,
We'll come back sometime.
Yeah, please.
love to.
No, he already said he was coming back, right?
Yeah, no, I love it here. I'm coming back. Sure.
There you go.
And if you get a chance, if you listen to us, check out Peter's podcast. Well, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for
pleasure.
being part of this.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Helen.
You're
Appreciate
welcome,
it. Very kind of you to invite me.